Good morning, guys. Today we are starting the Kollel Boker, Surfside Kollel Boker that we're doing. We're adding into it the LeYisrael. The LeYisrael is written by Rav Chaim Vital. Remember that Sigula I told you guys about the Ayeh and asking of three different things, and we went into the sources of what he did. So Shara Kavanot was written by Rav Chaim Vital. Rav Chaim Vital was one of like 10 students that Arizal had. Arizal had a bunch of students, one of them, Rabbi Shmuel de Ozida. I mentioned him in particular because Rabbi Shmuel de Ozida studied with the Arizal before Rav Chaim Vital came to Sfat. And after learning with the Arizal, he went on a boat, he went to Italy, to Rome. And when he settled in Italy, he ended up having a student called the Rama MiPano. Rabbi Menachem Azariah MiPano. Pano is like Fino, Italy, Italia. What's interesting about it further is that the Catholic Church, the Vatican, was very interested in any Jewish leaders or Talmidei Chachamim, Tzaddikim that were in Italy, in the Holy Roman Empire at the time, and they would send people to paint the rabbis, and they would take the paintings back to the Vatican and to the church. We actually have a few unbelievable detailed paintings of the Rama MiPano. You can see them online. I found them in a few of the archives online. Beautiful, colored paintings, detailed, like beard and everything. I found it to be unbelievable because we're able to have a glimpse into the Rama MiPano. What's interesting further about the Rama MiPano, we're going to learn about it later in one of our classes called Torah Stats, discussing how many books, Pisukim, letters are in the Torah today, in our count today. And then I'm going to show you over the course of 1,000 years some of the Sfarim of individuals who also counted, but they were all off. By some way or another, they're off by numbers from what we have today. It could have been from the count itself. And what's interesting is that Rama MiPano also did a count, but his count is actually accurate to today's number. Like, I think he's the only one from the list of the sources that actually has a count of the Torah from his time, and it's 100% accurate from when I did the research on it. I was doing specifically on the Torah because I was looking at the difference between an Ashkenazi Sefer Torah, a Sfaradi Sefer Torah, and a Temani. So Ashkenazim and Sfaradim don't have the same Sefer Torah.
Word-wise?
Words we do, but there's a difference. What's the difference? There's one letter. That's the difference between the Ashkenaz and the Sfaradi Sefer Torah. What is on the word Pisuad Daka. Daka is Dalid Chaf Aleph. That's how Sfaradim have it. The Ashkenazim have a Hey. In the Aleppo Codex, the word Daka comes up again in the Navi, and it's spelled with an Aleph. So according to Sfaradim that had the Aleppo Codex, the Aleppo Codex is one of the oldest Tanakhs, not the oldest, but one of the oldest full Tanakhs that we have. It's in Israel today in the museum, and they would check up words from that. And I believe Harambam speaks about the Aleppo Codex and how there were Talmidei Chachamim in Syria, in Chalab. So we're going to go into all that in the future. I think you showed me a picture of the Rama MiPano. Let's take a look at that. All right, yeah, perfect. This is it. This is one of them. This is not the color one, but there is actually one that you can find that's in color of the Rama MiPano. I found it to be extremely interesting. You can actually see the clarity of how we look like. So it's pretty detailed. And the church was very careful with that. They loved having paintings of individuals of high stature. So Rav Chaim Vital put together this book. There's nothing new here, which means that everything here is just milukat. It's just gathered from other sources. We're going to explain why he reads that. The goal of what he's trying to do with LeYisrael is that it's intended for everyone to read. It's not just intended for a businessman. What it is it gives you a little bit of Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. We're going to have a little bit of the Mishnah, a little bit of the Gemara, a little bit of the Zohar, a little bit of Halakha, and a little bit of Musar. What's interesting is that even people that learn Kollel may not cover each one of these categories. And what Rav Chaim Vital's intention with the book was to get you to cover all that on a daily basis. So at least from the beginning of the day till the end of the day, at least you studied. You could say, I studied a little Nevi'im today, a couple of Pisukim. I studied a little Zohar. You know, because sometimes even if you're studying halakha class or daf yomi, it's great, but you didn't do any zohar today. You didn't do any nivim, no ketubim. Don't forget, those are part of the curriculum. So that was his purpose. Today, it's known, unfortunately, as like a businessman's curriculum, or a guy who's a businessman, he learns Chok LeYisrael. The funny thing about it is that we spoke about this year before. Is that I always try to look at the curriculum of what the Gedolim are learning. You know, the Gedolim learning an art scroll English translation of a book, or are they? What is the curriculum that they're learning? And I try to stick to their curriculum. Meaning, if they're learning Rishonim, we learn Rishonim. If they're learning Chok LeYisrael, fine. And a lot of the Gedolim that I spoke to in Israel do the Chok LeYisrael every single morning. So I said, oh, if they're doing it every morning, then it must have some significance. So let's begin. We're going to read the Pesukim twice. So you guys will read the Pesukim twice. Then I'll read it in Aramית. Once we go through each, as we find any points like to bring up, we'll stop until we get to Shacharit. So, Bezat Hashem, let's go. Vezot HaBeracha.
וזאת הברכה אשר ברך משה איש האלוהים את בני ישראל לפני מותו.
וזאת הברכה.
וזאת הברכה אשר ברך משה איש האלוהים את בני ישראל לפני מותו.
ודע בכתדי בריך משה נביא אדוני יד בני ישראל קודם מותה. ויאמר.
ויאמר אדוני מסיני בא זרח משעיר למו הופיע מהר פרן נתן לראות קודש מימינו אש דת למו. ויאמר אדוני מסיני בא וזרח משעיר למו הופיע מהר פרן ואתה לראות קודש ממנו אש דת למו.
What's interesting, if you notice on that word esh dat, in the Torah it's spelled one word, esh dat, but we actually pronounce it two words. So it's interesting. That's Korean Ktiv. It's one of the few places. ואמר אדוני בסיני התגלי וזהור יקרא מסעיר התחזי לנו התגלי בגבורתה תורה דפרן ואימי דבבת קדושים כתב ימיני מגו אשתה אורייתה יהב לנה.
אף חובב עמים כל קדושיו ידיך והם תוכו ברגליך תישא בדברותיך. אף חובב עמים כל קודשו בידיך קדושיו בידיך והם תוכו לרגליך יישא מדברותיך.
אף חביבינון לשבטיה כאן קדישוהי בית ישראל בגבורה הפקינון איתון מדברין תחות עננך נטלין על ממרח.
We
got a great pasuk. Torah tzivah Moshe it's great pasuk. Oraita yehav lana Moshe mesara yeruta lechin shat Yaakov. Now that we came to this pasuk, what does it mean? Torah tzivah Moshe Yaakov. Anyone want to? Let's see what the English says here on it. It says the Torah which Moshe commanded us is a heritage for the congregation of Yaakov. So this is important to the teaching that we're kind of doing in this Kollel Boker. What's interesting about the Torah is one of the things that we call as a morasha. So what's a morasha? I don't know. Heritage. Yeah. We say heritage in English. What does that mean in the sense of the Torah? Is that the Torah from generation to generation survived and succeeded to those that delivered it in the way they received it. Let me explain to you. The Torah doesn't work well when you start to make changes to it. That's why the whole idea of like any type of like movements, whether they're conservative, reform, karaim, or any of that type of stuff. Anytime you start to change the Torah, it's on a slippery slope down to the abyss. So over here, what the Torah is telling you is that you know how you're going to succeed at giving over this heritage is that the way you got it, give it over. Don't change it. So a lot of times when you're learning or when someone's learning, he might feel I want to make adjustments to it, but that's not the heritage. Of course, a person can have hiddushim within the confines of what is permitted, you know, just like all the mefarshim are doing. A person can also be mahadish hiddushim. That's always permitted within the confines of the hachamim. But when we're teaching and giving over the Torah, we want to give it the way it is. We want to say, this is the standard. The standard is this. This is what it is. Now, I always think it's better to say where the standard is and what is required. Even if we're not there yet, we're going to talk about it. and say we're supposed to do it, because then we at least said, here's the standard. We can at least reach it. If we say, guys, everything's okay, it's not a big deal, that's mutad, then what we really have done is we brought the level completely down. And then there's no room for growth. And then everything can be justified. Because I can tell you, as someone that's reading a lot, and I'm always looking at like Hiddushim and things like that, you can use the Torah and find like there's enough Sfarim today that a guy could find like a Teshuvah for almost anything. Not that he could justify that it's right, but like you could really find so many sources today for anything. So a guy has to be careful, you understand? And that's why, of course, what I do today a lot is I have like 3 or 4 rabbis that I discuss different things with. Obviously, one for hashkafa, 1 or 2 for hashkafa things, and then I have a few for halacha. I have one, like for example, when I have hilchot sefrut, I don't go to the local rabbi of the shul, the pulpit rabbi. I go to sofer that I know is a sofer, and I send him the stuff. He knows it's his job. He does it fully. Or when I have a hilchot shechita question, I go to the one that's expert in that, or hilchot nida, the same thing again. There was a time where like the rabbi was the Swiss Army knife. He would go to him, he knew everything. Not that long ago, like 100 years ago, the rabbi was the all-in-one. It was the multi-tool. You went to him, he knew everything. Today, there's expert fields. So, I mean, I know, of course, there is Aseh Decha Rav. You have to have one rabbi for halacha, but you have to go into the sense that today there's going to be different experts in different halacha. So you can, when you have different things that you have questions on. I have another rabbi that does a lot of research that I learned how to research from. Big Talmid Chacham. His name is Rabbi Daniel Gladstein in Long Island. I learned everything of how to source out. Most of what I learned came from him. He does these source sheets every single week. Unbelievable stuff. He comes up with things you would never ever find. And like in the beginning, I didn't understand how he was doing it. And then I spent some time with him. I learned with him. We did a couple of really nice projects together in Long Island. And once I learned it, I realized it was an unbelievable skill and tool, because a lot of times when you're learning, when you go into the depth, it becomes interesting. You read it on the surface, you're like, what does this mean, this passage? You look at Rashi, you're more confused. You look at Onkelos, doesn't help anyway. English doesn't help. Then suddenly you start to research the topic. It's unbelievable. There's a rabbi called Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. He wrote a Torah called the Living Torah. He lived in Brooklyn. He went to Mir Yeshiva. He was a genius. He wrote a bunch of the books in Kabbalah, all in English, translated in English. So most of my education, foundation, came from him, from Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. He died at a young age in his 40s. He was a physicist. He was in the who's who of physicists. What's interesting, the story goes as follows: is when they went back to some of his rebbes from like a young age, like I think it was elementary school, and they had informed him, like, you had a student, Aryeh Kaplan, like, it's huge gadol, he wrote all these books, he's revealing a lot of these secrets. Most of them didn't remember him, which was extremely interesting. And I mean, from the earlier years, that was the story that came out. I know that he has a grandson in New York. I remember someone mentioned it to me. And his family has been printing a lot of his books. I think NCSY recently came up to like starting to print everything. If you really want to read stuff like next level, Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan is the direction. And it's in an English that's super, super simple. There's a lot of controversy in the texts that are the Kabbalistic text. It's not a one-way street. And there's no one school of Kabbalah. It's a big mistake that people assume that when a person says Kabbalah, that's it. It's one school of thought. It's not. It's just like Pshat. There's different schools in the realm of the Sod, and a lot of them are very conflicting. Some of them will tell you, never wear black, while others will say, no, today we're black. Or some of them will say, do this in a kavanah like this, and another one will say, no, don't do the kavanah. So they conflict with each other. So from this pasuk, we have to know that anytime we're learning anything of the Torah, let's look at their source, and that's what you want to give over to your kids. You want to teach them what the standard is. So, like for example, we're doing this book Mikdash Me'at about how to behave in shul. That's the standard. Meaning the standard is what the Sefer is bringing along with the sources. So that is what a Beit Knesset and a Beit Midrash was intended for. Today it changed a little bit. Okay, but let's at least say where the standard is. Of course, no one is recommended to do anything to be, a hero or to be a zealot to do anything. But at least let's educate ourselves as to what is the standard. So at least we know what it is. Okay. Oraita yehab lana Moshe mesalam yeduta de'achinshat Yaakov vayhi bishurun melech.
ויהי בשמעון מלך להתאסף ראשי עם יחד שבטי ישראל.
ויהי בשמעון מלך בהתאסף ראשי עם יחד שבטי ישראל.
והבה בישראל מלכה בהתחנשות ראשי עמה כחדש שבטיה דישראל יחי.
יחי ראובן ועל ימות ויהי מטר מספר.
ויהי ראובן מספר ימות ויהי מטר מספר.
יחי ראובן לחיי עלמה ומותה תניאנה לה ימות וכבדון בנוהי אחה סנתהון במניינהון. Reuven live and not die, and may they be enumerated within the count. I'm going to read it also in English. One thing I learned from the Chabad over here in Bell Harbor, which we don't do this a lot in Brooklyn or in Deal, is they read the Pesukim and then they read the English. And even though I understand Hebrew and I read the Mefarshim, a lot of times I hear it in English and it just gives me another spin, another click. And so I think it's important whenever.
You do that during the Torah reading?
No, not the Torah reading, but when we were doing Pirkei Avot, when we were doing Mishnayot, they would literally read in Hebrew and in English all the time. It was a common thing. And I remember asking the president of the Chabad, Mr. Wolf, really nice man, and he helped me a lot. The ability to be able to teach in one of the minyanim here. He said to me, "No, we always do it in English." He goes, "Some people don't understand." And I asked when I spoke once, and a lot of people didn't understand Hebrew, and I realized the benefit of just saying it in Hebrew to English because it helps. We're all learning. Always try to do things that can help make it understand it better. So let's go to the Nevi'im now. So you notice what we did now is when you read the Torah part, we're going to read the Pesukim twice, and then we're going to read Aramaic. There's also Rashi, but we're going to go now to the Nevi'im. The Nevi'im of today is Melachim Aleph Perek. What's interesting is that the Nevi'im that he's going to bring is usually going to be from the Haftarah. Not always, but usually that way. Okay, Vahi Chechalot Shedamo.
Where's the...
Go to Nevi'im. Next one. Where's Nevi'im?
This is Rashi.
There you go, Nevi'im.
ויהי ככלות שלמה להתפלל אל אדוני את כל התפילה והתחינה הזאת קם לפני מזבח אדוני תבואה הברכה וכפה פרוסות השמיים.
ויהי ככלות שלמה. One time. We only read it once. I read the Aramaic. Rava kad shetzeh shlomo letzala kodam anay yatz kal tzelota uva'ota hada kam min kodam madbecha darai midahava kedowa al bikoi vidohi pelisan bitzlo letzet shemaya. This is in the Nevi'im in Melachim Aleph. This is when they established the Bet HaMikdash. So it's saying here, I'll read it in English. And it was, as Shlomo finished praying all this prayer and supplication to the Lord, that he arose from before the altar of the Lord, from kneeling on his knees, and his hands spread out towards heaven. This is interesting. When I read this, I was very interested in how he was praying to God at the point. We don't see this. He literally got down on his knees, Shlomo HaMelech, 2 knees, his hands open like that, and he was making the tefillah. That's how he prayed, meaning if you saw Shlomo HaMelech, he wasn't in the Amidah like this, standing. He was on his knees like this, praying to God. Which is an interesting, we don't see that in Tefillah, but if you looked at Shlomo HaMelech, the king, that was how he communicated and he got his feeling out to the Borei Olam. Next, Vayamod.
ויעמוד ויברך את כל קהל ישראל קול גדול לאמור.
וקם ובריך יד כאן קהלת ישראל קל רב לממד. Baruch. Yeah.
This, I know that there's Shnai Mikra of they do twice the Torah and then one Kulus.
Yes.
Why Nevi'im? We also do it they do
1 and 1. No, so it's only 1 and 1. You actually said the answer in your question. It's Shnai Mikra. Our Targum is so this is the Mikra. The Mikra is only the Torah, not the Nevi'im and Ketuvim. So Shnaim Mikra on the Torah. Echa Targum. This is the Targum, Onkelos.
Onkelos is the Kollel.
Yeah, now in the Nevi'im, there's Targum, but it's not always Onkelos. Sometimes it could be other Targumim. Onkelos wrote the Targum of the Torah. His name was Onkelos ben Kelunicus. He was a Roman. He converted. His uncle, I believe, was Titus. You can't imagine this. A family where one individual writes a Perush that were what we say is, from Moshe Sinai that he re-brought back, meaning this was originally given from Moshe Sinai, and then it got lost, and then through his learning and his dedication to finding and writing a Perush, he brought back the words of the Targum. And then at the same time, his uncle is looking to destroy the Beit HaMikdash. This family is the most dysfunctional family you ever saw in your entire life. You understand? One is a king, but this happened a lot in the Romans, in the Roman Empire at the time, and even further. That many times some of their greatest senators, and they were called senators at the time, would convert because they were really true people. What I mean in the time is that the haters were true, and they were also true that if you sat with a conversation with them, you were able to convince them that, hey, you're doing wrong, he would be honest with himself. He'll say, okay, you know what? You brought a couple of great points. I'm willing to change. And some of them went full 180 degrees and they switched. Like the Gemara gives unbelievable stories of that. We should read the story of Onkelos ben Kelunicus. It's an unbelievable story. Before he becomes religious, he does a seance where he calls some of the spirits, one of them being Jesus. He calls him down, Yeshu, and asks him, should I convert, not convert? He calls Bilam Harasha, Bilam ben Beor, the descendant of Laban HaArami. And he also does a seance. He tells him, what do you think? Should I convert, not convert? And they give him all the advice. No, don't do it. They asked them what the punishment that they got was. It's unbelievable. It's an unbelievable Gemara. We're going to go into it when we get into it. And it's so interesting. So back to your question, it's always Shnai Mikra of the Torah, Echad Targum. When it comes to the other things, Torah and Nevi'im, we just read it one and one. One and one. Okay.
I know there was like Onkelos for other stuff.
Yeah, it's Targum. We call it Targum. We don't call it Onkelos.
This isn't Onkelos for Nevi'im, what we read here.
It's Targum. We call it Targum. I don't know if this one is specifically Onkelos. It's Targum. If you look now today on Sefaria, they have 4 or 5 Targumim on the Torah, on the Nevi'im, and they're sourced well. But it's very important to know something about Sefaria. I use it a lot since it came out. But over the last few years, there's a lot of New Testament and church stuff in there, in the English stuff. So what that means is that a lot of times, I search specific terms and I find that it's bringing New Testament stuff. Supposedly someone wrote them an email. I didn't, but someone that I know wrote them an email. He said that he told them, he's like, why is this stuff here? And the response was they're putting the text there because that's what they want. And he was like, I don't get it. It's a lot of Orthodox Jews use it. And the response, supposedly, I didn't see it, was, if you don't like it, don't use it, or build your own site. Because all their texts, supposedly, they give away for free, or there are copies of it online for free. You just have to build the software to put it all together. So you have to be careful when you're learning Sefaria. What this has further required me to do now when I'm using Sefaria is that I question Sefaria's Hebrew text now. Because a source that will now put in New Testament stuff on the English, you have to be careful if their Hebrew stuff is not convoluted. You understand? Because, basic Chumash, Rashi stuff, you can double check with the Chumash, but sometimes you're going to look up a Ramak, or Rabbi Moshe al-Sheikh, or a Hatam Sofer, and I don't know if the individual that would want to serve somebody anything of the New Testament or things like that inside of the Jewish world of texts should be trusted even on the Hebrew text. So it's confusing, and I don't fully get it, because in and of itself, the researchers of the Torah are usually the Jewish people. So I don't understand what it is. It could probably be the individual that's financing this. Could be from the school of Reform or Conservative, and that could probably be the reason, because they're the one who's financing it. So they're calling the shots. You understand? But I've been using Sefaria for years. It's fantastic. It's really, really good. Just this has been something that's been bothering me that came up, and people need to know about it, because if you're carte blanche putting on a filter on the internet that Safari is good, you got to know that the content on there could not be good, at least in the English stuff. I don't know if they've taken it off. This was from a few months back, and I checked it up. I don't know if it's been adjusted. Okay, let's go by Yamud. Vayvarech et kol Israel, kol gadol lemor. I'll read that. Baruch. Go.
ברוך אדוני אשר נתן מנוחה לעמו ישראל ככל אשר דיבר לא נפל דבר אחד מכל דברו הטוב אשר דיבר ביד משה עבדו.
בדיך אדוני די יהי נאיך לעמי ישראל ככל די מלל לה בטל פתגמה אחד מקל פתגמו תקניה די מלל בידה דמשה עבדה. What's interesting, guys, we say this when we open up the Torah. Baruch Hanai Shem Tamen Chana Moisek Yechodesh V'Lo Nafal Davar Echad Mikol Torah Torah Shetiver Mei Moshe. The read is actually when we put back the Torah. So what's nice about learning the Nevi'im is that when you learn who said what and when it was, it's like the Mi Amar El Mi is school. You know, I remember we used to learn in school, they would give you a pasuk on Torah, Mi Amar El Mi. So now that we're learning in the Navi, the next time you're going to go in the Torah and you read it, you're like, this was Shlomo HaMelech praising God. You know, it gives a little bit more feeling context. Yehi memrad Adonai elahana besa'adana keman dahava besadat ahavatana la yishbekinana la v'yarchikinana. Well, guys, one second, I want to point something out. The word avotenu does not mean our fathers. Okay? It means our forefathers, which is Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov. Anytime the word avotenu comes, it's just referring to our forefathers. What's interesting is yesterday, there's a sigula that was brought down. We didn't go into it because we did a bunch of the sigulot for Yom Kippur, but there's a sigula that's brought down. We read the story of Nadav and Avihu, Acharei Mot Shnei Bnei Aharon, in Yom Kippur. So there's this little piyut that they say before Shnei Bnei Aharon. We do it in Brooklyn in the Syrian and Lebanese community, and over there it refers to Nadav and Avihu as Avotenu. It put it in there, and if you look at the translations, it brings there. Now I don't think it literally means that, but it's showing you the severity of the Gedolim, both Nadav and Avihu, and the Sigula is as follows: is that while you're singing the piyut or reading the Torah, if you can meditate and focus and shed tears on the fact that Aharon's two eldest children, Nadav and Avihu, died, the sigula is that you're guaranteed, according to the piyut that you sing right before, that in your lifetime, your children will never, has v'shalom, pass away. They'll always live, and you will see them live full lives. And you'll have a full life and see them enjoy it, which is unbelievable. Sigula brought down. It's only on Yom Kippur when it's read. The sigula is in the piyut itself. By reading the piyut, it is. I don't have the Yom Kippur machzor, but we'll come to this when we go back to doing the sigulot on it, which is great. You know, now how does a person do that? So I asked a few rabbis. I'm like, how am I supposed to cry on Nadav and Avihu? I never met them. It's not like sometimes there was a gadol in your lifetime. You met him, you had glimpses of him, you spoke with him once, you got a beracha. Okay, I got it. He's not here anymore. I felt something. How do you feel it on someone else? It's not easy, but I was told from what I learned is that you take it from the sense of Aharon. That a person has to feel like he's Aharon HaKohen, and that has v'shalom, that transpired. And by reliving that feeling of Aharon, a person would be able to has v'shalom, kind of understand what that is, and then he can have more of a feeling to try to shed a tear. Also, it's the day of the Mishkan being anointed was a day of kapara, and so it's unfortunate that Nadav and Avihu, which were the Gedolim at the time, and when we did this, when we studied the whole story of Acharei Mot, I gave in I think 11 or 12 reasons why they died, and there's a couple brought down the Torah and the Gemara, Rashi. Through them, I gave 11 or 12 reasons, all with sources as to why they died. Again, why do I even need sources for this? Because the Torah says that they did something and they died. But it was the day of the inauguration of the Mishkan. God was very happy. When was all this inauguration? It was right now. This time. When was it? Because right after Yom Kippur, God said, Salachti barecha. He tells Moshe, I figure of everyone, I'm done with the Egel, it's all great. There was only one problem. When the Bnei Yisrael did the Cheta Egel in Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, what happened? All the Ananei HaKavod dissipated. When Bnei Israel were walking, they had clouds around them. So based on that, it was a very foggy 40 years, and it was a very cloudy 40 years for Bnei Israel. They didn't see the sun at all. From based on if they have Ananei Kavod, it was all cloudy. So it was fog all around. It was cloudy all around. It was being protected, you know. And Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, when they did Chet HaEgel, God took away the Anei Kavod. And Bnei Israel noticed it. They noticed because everyone saw them. Their enemies had access to them. It wasn't a comfortable time. And after Moshe Rabbeinu goes to 40 days, and another 40 days in this whole process, he comes down and tells them, God forgave you. But Bnei Israel said, all right, great. But where are the clouds? And Moshe said, I don't know. Like I said, you're right. I don't know. Because there's a big difference between being forgiven for doing something harmful to somebody and then saying, I love you again. You know what it is? It's like sometimes, Boker Tov, sometimes, let's say person gets in a sichsuch, argument, a vikuach with somebody, and he worked it out. After a while, he worked it out. But, okay, I forgive you, we're on good terms, but we're not buddies. It's a big difference between buddies. So what happened was the whole Chet HaEgel, it's a whole complicated avon of what it was, and, it was a very complicated situation. What was the Chet HaEgel? I've learned it a couple of times with different rabbis. They've given great interpretations of what it was, to the point where they explained it in a way that I think if most people were there at that generation, they probably would follow the Chet HaEgel. It was that convincing, the ideology behind what they were doing. When God saw that they wanted like a man-made material structure connecting them to the Lord, to God, what he did is like, okay, if you want that, I wasn't going to institute it, but we'll make a mishkan. And he said, okay, whoever wants to do gold or silver, whatever they have, gather it. So over the course of the 4 days between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, they gathered all the money and everything. And God saw how much people were donating money for the mishkan. He saw the heart of the people, the devat libam. It was their little heart that was giving the donation. God said, okay, Sukkot that night, 83 days after he took it away, he gave them back on the night of Sukkot the protection. And I was listening yesterday to Rav Musafi in Israel. He was saying that we call Zman Simchatenu. What does that mean? He says that a happy time. But what does it mean in the context of today? That he says those 7 days is your simcha for the year. That's how much happiness you're going to have for the year. So if you want to extend the most happiness you want for a year, it's a good sigula. Make that a happy time for yourself. How do you do that? Make your sukkah enjoyable. Make the meals enjoyable. Buy your kids and your wife gifts, clothing, whatever they need. What else? On the Chol HaMoed, do things with your kids. Spend time with them. Make yourself happy. If you enjoy having a cigar, I'm not encouraging or condoning smoking in any way, but if that's what you enjoy, open up your learning, have a cigar, enjoy a nice drink while you're learning in the sukkah. Do what is owning for you. On the Hagim, they say Hatzio lachem, Chatzio laHashem. Half of the holidays for you, half is for Hashem. You understand? There's different times. That's one of the reasons why on Yom Tov we read 5 aliyot. Why don't we read 7 like on Shabbat? So there's a couple of reasons. One of the main reasons is the rabbis wanted everyone to go home early, so they knocked out 2 aliyot and told them you'll go home earlier so you can spend more time with your family. So what a lot of the shuls do, the shuls said, wow, they knocked it down to 5, let's add another 5 then. And suddenly they started selling more to collect more money. And suddenly they abolished what the Hachamim want. Hachamim said, I did this just so you go home early. Now what you in essence did is you extended the tefillah, you made the people stay more. It's just funny because if you look at the reasoning, is what they wanted to make a short tefillah. So I like to pray like the 7 o'clock minyan on the holiday, because you get out early. People pray at 7 and not they don't want us to extend. Let's finish up the Nevi'im and then we'll go pray. Okay, להטות לבבינו.
להטות לבבינו עליו ללכת בכל דרכיו ולשמור מצוותיו וחוקיו ומשפטיו אשר ציווה את אבותינו.
להפנאה ליבנה לדחלתה למחך באחד אורחן דתקנן קודמוהי ולמיתר פיקודוהי כמוהי בדינוהי תפקד יד אהבה התנה.
ויהיו דברי אלה אשר התנבנתי לפני אדוני כרובים אל אדוני ימים ובלילה, לעשות משפט עבדו משפט עמו ישראל דבר יום ביומו.
ויהון פתגמד אילן לי ואתי מן כבוד אדוני מתקבלין כבוד אדוני אל ההנה ימם ולילי למעבד דין עבדי ולבן עמי ישראל פתגם יום ביומם. Okay, we just knocked out these two right now, so Bezat Hashem tomorrow we'll continue. We already have Shacharit, so Baruch Adonai le'olam amen amen.